What is the significance of Ludwig von Mises's magnum opus, Human Action? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. This is this week's Libertarian Angle, the show that brings you the principled and compromising case for libertarianism. I'm joined, as I am every week, by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, who's a professor of economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
And it's good to see you and to be with our viewers and listeners again.
Yeah, well, if you're new to FFF, come and visit us at fff.org for around 31 years of pure, uncompromising essays on liberty and presentations, videos, conferences, and the like. And, you know, Richard, a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned that we were celebrating Ludwig von Mises' birthday. And I don't think there are very many more people than you that know everything about Mises there is to know. You, of course, were the Ludwig von Mises Professor of Economics at Hillsdale College, and you became president of the Foundation for Economic Education, where Mises had a close relationship. So I thought, you know, why don't we use this opportunity to talk about Mises, the man, a little bit of history, his major contributions, and that, of course, means that you'll be carrying most of the ball in this program. But by the same token, Mises has played a tremendous role in my life. I mean, I was an economics major in college and learned all the Keynesian model building and didn't discover Austrian economics till much later after I discovered libertarianism, and it's had a profound impact on my life. So I thought, well, let's discuss that. But before we get to that, let me remind everybody that we've got our series going on restoring civil liberties. This is one of the best conferences we have ever put together. The videos are being put online on our website at fff.org, so you can catch up. And you'll notice something fascinating about these lectures is that they all revolve around the importance of civil liberties, but they all focus, at least so far, on different aspects of civil liberties and the critical importance of civil liberties to our lives as free human beings, and the critical importance of restoring civil liberties and protecting, of course, those that have still not been destroyed. So our next speaker, I'm pleased to say, is none other than Richard Ebeling. Richard will be speaking tomorrow at Tuesday. Well, I guess this video will be posted on Tuesday, so the video will be shown, well, let's just say Richard's presentation will be Tuesday night. And I think we'll be posting this tomorrow. We're recording it on Monday. It'll be recorded posted on Tuesday. So the presentation will be tonight. And you're not going to want to miss this. I mean, Richard is one of the best speakers and has long been one of the best speakers in the libertarian movement. And he's been writing and speaking for FFF since our inception. In fact, in our very first year of operation, we devoted almost an entire issue of our monthly journal, Future of Freedom, which at that time was called Freedom Daily, to the critical importance of civil liberties. And Richard had an essay in that early publication back in 1990. And since then has written, any number of articles on civil liberties over the years. And Richard's going to bring an interesting twist that has not yet been emphasized in the lectures and the excellent lectures that have been presented. Richard's going to integrate the concept of economic liberty with civil liberties. Now, this is where the progressives and the leftists just go astray, at least those that are committed to civil liberties, and many of them are, but they don't understand that their progressivism on economics, their socialism, their interventionism, destroys the very foundations of the civil liberties to which they're ostensibly committed. And so Richard's going to show how economic liberty is a necessary prerequisite to civil liberties. But why don't you give us a little bit of your own introduction to your talk tomorrow, Richard?
Well, as Jacob was saying, there has been a tendency to dichotomize the notion of personal freedom and civil liberties from the institutions and the necessity for property rights and economic liberty. But as I will try to highlight and bring out in my remarks tomorrow evening, Tuesday evening, is that it is perhaps not a coincidence that those societies that have seen the greatest diminishment or abolition or restraint on civil liberties have been, in general, those societies that have been most stringent in also restricting or abolishing economic freedom and property rights. While other societies, where property rights have been secure to one degree or another and respected by the law and custom, have tended also to be those societies in which civil liberties have experienced the greatest degree of protection or security, or if they have been abridged, have found it easier to restore them given the wider institutional setting of a free market economy. Why? What is it that links the two? And how can we understand this both conceptually and from looking at it historically in terms of different societies and different political and ideological systems, especially over the last 100 years, the 20th century and now into the 21st century? This is important because we are now facing what I consider to be serious threats to our liberty in all of its facets. Certainly economic liberty because of the growth of intrusive regulatory interventionist and now more explicitly the calls for economic planning through Green New Deals and so forth. Yet those who advocate these things continue to say, but this is just the economic side of things. A Green New Deal to save the planet, economic restrictions and tax policy to assure income equity, but we're not going to challenge civil liberties. You could still have freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom of assembly, freedom of worship, and so on and so forth. But I would like to bring out and highlight in my remarks that once we throw economic liberty under the bus and its underpinning of the respect for the property rights of individuals and their right of free exchange and association, it is not surprising that not far behind that are dampenings, restrictions, restraints, and historically, many cases of abolition of civil liberties, where you become merely a servant and a slave of the state in all aspects of one's environment and life. And that's part of the theme that I'll be bringing out tomorrow, and why, therefore, we need to see the connection and the importance of preserving both if we want either one.
Okay, so there you have it. I assume most of our viewers are libertarians, so you're going to get a real libertarian presentation tomorrow that incorporates the concept of economic liberty, which is so important to libertarians, with the importance of civil liberties, which is also so important to libertarians. So you're in for a real treat tomorrow. If you've already registered, you will get a reminder with a Zoom link tomorrow on Tuesday. I guess that would be today as you're watching this video. And if you're new, if you haven't registered and you would like to register, just go to our homepage at fff.org. You'll see the conference announcement there, Restoring Civil Liberties. Click on that and you'll get to the registration page. Admission's free. You can't get a better deal than that. You just sign up and you'll get your Zoom link shortly thereafter, and we'll look forward to seeing you. We're going to have a Q&A session as we do after every session. The talk will be somewhere around 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere around there, and then it'll be followed by a short Q&A period. So should be finished by around 8:30 at the latest, and so we look forward to having you all there. All right, Richard, let's move into Mises. He's obviously played a critically important role in your life. You've played a big role in my life. Why don't you tell us what it is about Mises and the Austrian school that really changed the course of your life?
Well, let me sort of put this in the context is that for those who may know nothing or little about Ludwig von Mises, he was an Austrian economist, both in the place of his birth as well as a particular school or approach of economic analysis and theory and policy. And his contributions stand out because, as I will take a little bit of time to explain in more detail, he really was the first thoroughgoing and decisive critic of the very notion of whether a socialist planned economy was economically possible or not. And his answer was, it is not. It will lead not to freedom and prosperity, but to despair, poverty, and tyranny. He also was a developer of what's called the Austrian theory of money in the business cycle. And that is that the booms and busts of recessions and inflations are not something inherent in the market, but have their source in government control of the money supply and the manipulation of money, interest, and credit in the banking system, and through that, the economy as a whole. And finally, he was also a strong critic of not just socialism, that is, that comprehensive abolition of a market economy, but the interventionist or regulatory state. And as I will explain, his conclusion there was that not as extreme as socialism, interventionism is sort of like sand in the machine. And while the machine may not be totally destroyed, the gumming up of the works prevents the market from efficiently and effectively operating the way it's supposed to assure growing prosperity for the people in a society. So, but that is sort of like, well, who is he and why is that important? Let me talk a little bit about him, his place in the Austria of his time, his international name recognition and importance, and finally, why we should keep that memory of the man and especially his ideas alive and focused upon because of their continuing relevance today. Ludwig von Mises was born on September 29th, 1881, in the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, which encapsulated a large part of Central Europe, in the city of Lemberg, in the far eastern part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Today, that is known as Lvov in the post-Soviet independent country of Ukraine. His family moved from Lemberg to Vienna when he was a relatively young boy, a teenager, beginning high school. His father was a prominent civil engineer and was working in the respective government ministries in Vienna. He ended up going to the University of Vienna, and it was there that, interestingly enough, he changed his views, because before that, his late high school years, his beginning college years, Ludwig von Mises, the staunch defender of free markets and laissez-faire, had strong sympathies for both socialism and the interventionist state. But it was his early years studying and doing case studies under professors who assigned him various projects, and then reading a book by the founder of the Austrian School of Economics, Karl Menger, that, as he put it, turned him into an economist and away from his historian plans and that were clearly open to an interventionist and socialist perspective. His first writings, in fact, were on one of the things that made his first fame, and that was his theory of money in the business cycle. In 1912, he published a book called The Theory of Money and Credit. What he did there was to blend a variety of traditions and approaches preceding him, and came up with the idea that money, first of all, is not the creation and the creature of the state. Like Karl Menger, that Austrian school founder, money evolves naturally and spontaneously out of people's attempts to fulfill desired exchanges when the direct barter of goods and services will not function. But this means that the state doesn't need to control money. The state doesn't need to try to create money. The state can basically keep its hands out of money, and the market will just generate a medium of exchange to facilitate the growing complexity of a system of division of labor with intricate networks of trade and exchange. Second, he said, well, crucial to any type of economic system and the monetary system is the banking order. Banking is merely the financial intermediary institutions that bring together savers and investors. Some people wish to set aside some of the income they've earned to use and spend at a later date. And there are others who would like to use money and the resources that money represents in the marketplace to undertake investment and other types of projects that their own existing money incomes and resources would not permit them to do. So there's a mutual gains from trade here. I'm willing to defer some of my consumption spending by not spending all of my income in the present. You are interested in having access to more income and the resources it represents than your own income permits, but you might be willing to pay it back to me with a premium for allowing you to do so at some point in the future. Cannot we agree on a price that represents the value of the income I'm setting aside as savings for you to use in the present and paying me back with that premium in the future? And that's the origin of financial intermediation and the emerging price of resources across time, which we call the rate of interest. Now, what the advantage of the financial system and network of banks is that they act as focal points to draw everyone's individual savings together. And as the financial intermediary, the banks then funnel these accumulated savings from many out to those who they evaluate as creditworthy borrowers who have reasonable business plans, and therefore the expectation that the principal plus the promised interest will be returned. Now, the system therefore enables the capacity to bring together pools of resources in the form of savings to undertake projects in the present that probably would be unable to be carried out. Investment, technological innovations, capital formation, increasing the productivity of the labor forces through the workers having more and better machines and tools with which to produce goods and services over time. That is the basis of the rising standards of living in a society. So what then gums up the works? Well, again, in a nutshell, what Mises says is that while it is real savings, that is resources set aside for non-consumption purposes, which are being lent to desiring and credit-worthy borrowers for those resources to be used for investment projects that will pay off with goods and services in the future. The trading of these resources across time is done through the intermediary of money. And the problem is that almost since the beginning of history, governments have wanted to have access to the resources of their citizens and subjects. Traditionally, how do we gain access to the resources of your subjects as a king or a prince or even an elected representative government? You tax people. The problem is that people get upset with taxes. You're very conscious that the government is siphoning off part of the income that they have honestly earned through the productive efforts and trade in the marketplace. So is there a surreptitious way for government to gain access to more resources than they can get away with directly through taxation? And governments found that they could use the banking system this way. Banks could create money. They could issue paper money and extend this in the form of, quote, loans to the government to use for its spending. But then those paper monies being spent in the economy causing price inflation. But Mises pointed not only just causes prices in general to rise, that's a danger and a negative in itself from these monetary expansionary policies, but the way the money is injected into the economy through the banking system, the distortion of interest rates, the undertaking of investment projects for a longer duration and with the presumption of a greater availability of resources than the real savings of the society has available and to sustain them, brings about an imbalance, a distortion, an out of whack between the savings decisions of some and the investment decisions of others. And that means that you're heading for not only an inflationary rise in prices, but a wrong twist to how resources are used in the investment processes of the society. A wrong twist that will be discovered when the inflation either slows down or ends, unless it goes to a total crash and destruction of the currency through hyperinflation, that resources and labor have been drawn into projects and investment activities that are unsustainable in a normal, balanced economy based on the real savings in the economy. And that sets the stage for a downturn when it's turned out that we've been trying to undertake too many projects which resources aren't fully available, including using workers for projects that cannot be completed. And therefore they're let go and there's rising unemployment. So for Mises, it's the government's manipulation of the banking system for a variety of reasons that sets the stage for these distortions between savings and investment, the rising prices in the economy, that sets off the stages of the boom and the bust, the inflations and the recessions, where the recession is not something just that happens, but in fact is the discovery of the investment saving mistakes. And therefore, it's a rebalancing correction time to reshuffle resources and investment horizons and plans to be consistent with the real availability of resources in the society as a whole. Now, this became the basis of an entire approach to understanding money, banking, inflation, and the business cycle. The most prominent follower, sort of protege of Mises in this, was another Austrian economist, Friedrich A. Hayek, who went to the London School of Economics in the early 1930s as a professor and popularized his version of Mises's theory in the English language. And in fact, in the 1930s, through Hayek, Mises's business cycle theory became one of the leading rivals competing for understanding and acceptance against the rising emergence of Keynes and the Keynesian revolution. Now, as things turned out, because of the politics and the ideologies of the time, Keynes's ideas went into ascendancy and the Austrians' ideas did not. But for a period of time, Mises's ideas through Hayek became the most prominent rival against Keynes in the English-speaking world of the 1930s. Now, the other important contribution that Mises made, and this is really the one for which he gained personally the greatest international reputation, and in the eyes of socialists, infamy, was that in the years immediately after the First World War, he challenged the socialists to an important question. Okay, Mr. Socialist, like in Russia under Lenin and attempts of socialists in other European countries in the immediate post-World War I period, you want to overthrow the capitalist system. You want to nationalize the means of production. You want to abolish markets with prices and wages, and you want to now centrally plan the economy. And you say that you're not only going to preserve people's freedom, but you're going to give them greater prosperity than anything that had occurred or could occur in a market economy. I have one question for you, Mr. Socialist. How will you know what to produce, where to produce, and for what purposes to produce? The reason Mises says this is that there's many uses for the resources of the society. They're pulled in many directions because people want this and people want that, and there's different ways to use land, there's different ways to use labor in different production projects, machinery, tools, and equipment, the capital of the society. How will you know how to use the resources effectively and efficiently to produce the products that consumers, the people of your new socialist state, really want, and in the most efficient way to get the most in value terms out of them that is possible, and better than the market economy? And Mises's answer was, Mr. Socialist, you cannot. How do we know what people want in terms of goods and services in society? Well, in a capitalist or market-based economy, consumers inform potential producers about the goods that they would like to have by their demand for them. And not only do they express a demand for those goods, they express the prices they might be willing to pay to get them. So now the entrepreneurs, the businessmen, the enterprisers in a free economy know, well, on the one hand, this is what consumers want and the prices they might be willing to pay. On the other hand, they're the resources out of which those desired goods could be manufactured, but they're scarce. So the businessmen now compete against each other. Hey, Joe, don't work for Sam, work for me. Bob, I need some capital equipment. Will you produce some machines, tools, and equipment for me instead of William over there? Oh, I need a construction company to be building my factory. Could you make my factory instead of Walter's, because I'll pay you. So businessmen are competing against each other for the hire and the use of the scarce means of production, land, labor, and capital. And their bids are based upon what they think they could get as compensation in having a finished product to sell over a period of time after the investment has been completed from the consumers who might want it. So now you have two sets of prices formed in the society. The prices for consumer goods, as reflecting people's demands to buy them, and the prices of the inputs, the factors of production, the land, labors, and capitals, based upon the bids of competing businessmen, evaluating what those resources are worth in their respective lines of production. So now you have emerging two sets of prices. Two sets of prices. On the one hand, you have the prices for the output and the prices for the input. This now enables entrepreneurs, businessmen, private enterprises to undertake the process of economic calculation. How might I produce what consumers want in competition to other businessmen making other products in the most rational, efficient, and least costly way? That's what assures that the scarce means of production are producing what the consumers want in the most cost-efficient ways to get the most out of them, so as many wants of the consumers in the society may be fulfilled given the constraints of scarcity in general. Now, that Mises said the problem with socialism is that you abolish private property, you end all market exchanges, and therefore you do away with prices and costs. Since there's no trades on which these prices can emerge. So how will you know what consumers want, and more importantly, really, what it is you're going to produce? What is the most highly valued use for labor? What is the most minimum cost use of capital? What is the most rational allocation of land and resources to be combining with labor and capital in different ways to make those products? You've taken away the institutional mechanisms and the market signals to make rational choices. You don't know what anything is worth. You don't know what would be more expensive or less expensive in the production side of things. So you're going to be creating an economic environment of what Mises called in a later little book of his, planned chaos rather than planned prosperity. This means that a socialist system can never work effectively and rationally, and certainly can never do better than a functioning and vibrant and free market economy. Socialism will fail because it institutionally is unable to do what it has been promised, and certainly not in any way in comparison to a vibrant, open, competitive market system. Now, of course, this drove the socialists crazy, Jacob, right? My God, what do you mean it can't work? Oh, no, wait a minute, but we're good people, and we want, we mean well, and capitalism is so bad, it's gotta, oh, no, don't work. So they came up with gimmicks. Oh, let's play at markets within a socialist economy. Mises replied to that, particularly Friedrich Hayek, also, showed the errors and inconsistencies and unworkability of, quote, market socialism. The upshot of it is that while for most of his lifetime, he first wrote on his critique of socialism in 1920 in an article, and then expanded it into his entire book on socialism. I can even show it here. Yeah, socialism right there, socialism. Which came out as a book in 1922. So in fact, we're about to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Mises's full book on socialism, right? 2022. And here he extended the analysis to say, it's not only that socialism can't work economically, let's look at its social consequences, its political consequences, its cultural consequences, its consequences for global peace and prosperity. And he showed in ways that, of course, we don't have the time to go into, that socialism was wanting in all of these areas, that it would involve a destruction of the global community of man and his culture. Was he right? Well, where's the Soviet Union today? Where's the Eastern European countries today? Even China, which is still communist and has a controlled economy, they pulled away from Mao's craziness of no private farmers, no businessmen of any kind. They manipulate and control them. But even the Chinese have had to accept the fact, well, you have to give some people a little elbow room to try to produce things and have motives and signals to do so, even if we manipulate and control them, because we are the Communist Party and we know best. The only place you find any attempt to still do this nonsense is places like North Korea. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Jacob. I doubt if many of our viewers and listeners are rushing to cross the DMZ to make a home in North Korea because there's so much freedom and prosperity there. I know I'm going out on a limb here, and while people over the last 6 decades have chosen to board little rickety boats and go from Havana to Key West, I'm not sure how many people have done the reverse and said, oh, I can't stand the poverty and the evilness in America. I'm going to sneak into a little dinghy boat and I'm going to find heaven in Havana. It doesn't work that way. And it has not worked that way. And without being too sarcastic or limiting the sarcasm, I would just remind the viewers and the listeners of all those people who attempted over the decades that there was a Berlin Wall separating East Berlin from West Berlin. All those people who tried to escape from East Germany and East Berlin and died trying to cross that wall, both because there was a lack of political and economic civil liberties, but most importantly, the economic poverty of the society. So 100 years after Mises wrote all of these things, he has been proven right and the socialists wrong. And then, I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm a professor. It's like I'm I'm like the little, toy that you put the ever-ready battery in, he won't stop. Okay, so the last thing is that Mises' analysis of government intervention and regulation. And we see that today. There's a labor shortage. Maybe it's because government has been manipulating the structure of wages by paying people not to work because of these special programs due to the pandemic. Businesses are finding a hard time to undertake new productions or to operate their business. Maybe it's because they're hamstrung by both taxes and regulations in general. There's not enough vibrant innovation going on. Well, maybe it's because the FDA and the Federal Trade Association, the Commission, and so on, put these restraints on innovative creativity to try to find solutions at moments of crises, like the COVID crisis in early 2020, when there were no masks available. There were none of the respirators available in hospitals. Businesses were trying to creatively find and improvise solutions with a shortage of these things. But what did the CDC and the FDA say? No. Only we know the kind of masks, we know the kind of ventilators. Only we know who should produce them and how should produce them. And no, bad boy, you can't do that. And that's the type of restrictions and restraints and sand in the machine that Mises says destroys an economy slowly but surely through the intervention of state, which ends up being, in the long run, as disastrous as socialism.
All right, well, you've made my life really easy today, Richard, because we're about out of time, and I just got here and got to listen to a fascinating and excellent introduction to Austrian economics, and that was great. Oh, gosh, Richard, I forgot to press the record button. You're going to have to repeat this. No, that was absolutely excellent. Let me just add, I know we're about out of time. Let me just add that this is the reason why the left hates Mises and has always hated Mises. He's the most devastating critic of socialism that one could ever read. And if people who don't know much about Austrian economics, I would recommend a little book called Economic Policy by Ludwig von Mises. You read that little book, which was a series of lectures he delivered in Argentina in the 1950s. I guarantee you will know more economics than most economics professors. And the other thing, Richard, that I found really attractive about Mises and Austrian economics is that they talked about regular human beings. They weren't drawing the charts and graphs that I learned in college with Keynesian economics. They're talking about the market as a process dealing with real human beings. And finally, the reason I found Mises especially attractive was that he was very, very principled in terms of what government should do and not do. I like Hayek. Hayek's been a big influence in my life. Milton Friedman's been a big influence in my life. But to me, they didn't have that pure, uncompromising, principled exposition of the role of government in a free society as it related to the market. So on that note, Richard, we're about out of time. We'll wrap things up. We will see you tonight for Richard's talk at 7 p.m., Restoring Civil Liberties. He's going to be incorporating civil liberties and economic liberties. Come to our website if you're not registered at fff.org. And Richard, I greatly enjoyed the visit, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Till next time.